Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out my channel, and I'm going to pick it up where I left off about 2 years ago. We're approaching a year and a half for sure, but October would be 2 years. Right now it's June, and that's the exhaust on my F250, and it has a big block in it. Now, what I'm going to do is be covering the installation, not step by step, but the overall installation as far as what I had to address, some of the highlights, some of the points that I needed to look at whenever I was doing the installation on the Banks torque tubes. And it's going on my 97 F250 HD. This is a big block, two-wheel drive, extended cab long bed. Now, as far as the header installation, it's going to work pretty much for anything with a big block in it for quite a few years. The other thing I'm going to be doing is installing a catback exhaust system, and that's going to be from Flowmaster. I was thinking about going with the Banks, but for the money difference of like $400, I'd just rather stick with the Flowmaster. It's a good system. I've had them in the past on other vehicles, so no sense in screwing around and spending that extra money for something that may or may not satisfy me when I'm used to one already. Now, currently on the truck, and I did a video prior to this, I have Hedman headers on there now. And I did do a sound test of what it sounded like, so let me put a little clip in there of that right now. You can see I just got the truck at that point, and the oil needed changed, and it was smoking. It doesn't do any of that anymore. But I've done quite a few things since that video on the truck. But as far as the exhaust, it's exactly the same way. So that's what the exhaust sounds like now. I'm not going to fire it up, obviously. That's why I put it in the clip, because I don't want everything warm, because I got to start working on this thing. Once I get the headers on and the other exhaust, we'll go ahead and do some sort of a sound comparison maybe. I'll let you listen to what that sounds like so you can get a good idea. And the reason is because all the looking that I did online, I only found one video, and it was a Flowmaster video that talked about my truck as far as what the sound would be like. I was concerned about it being too loud. I'm getting to that age now where there is a too loud, but basically it's because this RV that we pull, I don't want this thing to be just droning us for a 1,000-mile trip to where all I hear is exhaust. There was a time that I didn't mind that, but now I just want something that's mild, and that's what they say this is. It comes with a big block muffler, the Flowmaster system does. So it should be relatively quiet. It's a 70 series. There's only one muffler that's above that that's quieter, and that's like an RV. But it was kind of expensive, and they didn't have a whole exhaust for it, just the muffler itself, where I'd have to take it to a shop and have them bend some pipe. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it all done today. Might have to string this over a couple of days. But let's go ahead and show you what the headers look like and the exhaust. This is the box that the Banks came in, and you can see these are 409 stainless. They are made very well, I'll tell you that right now. I've had a lot of headers over the years, and this is probably the most quality header I've ever seen. This is a very thick flange. That is 5/8 of an inch thick. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about is they say that you do not need to run gaskets with this. I've never done that before, and I know that the manifolds didn't have gaskets on them, but then again they were leaking, and I know that had a lot to do with the air injection, and as far as the heat being transferred out of the pipes into the head using the the water cooling that's going through the heads. You need that metal-to-metal contact for heat transfer. That's not the case with me. I've gotten rid of that. So let me tell you first off that this header is without the air injection or the air tubes, the individual air ports that get air pumped in from the air pump on the vehicle. Whenever you start your vehicle,
the air gets injected into the head through the ports on the exhaust to help with the burn process, basically to fan a fire, to make it run a little hotter. And then whenever the vehicle gets warm to running temperature, some of that air is diverted down to the catalytic converter and helps with the catalytic converter burning off whatever doesn't get burned in the combustion process, which is obviously, you know, the same thing. They're trying to fan the fire in the catalytic converter. Well, I got rid of my air pump. I've deleted that. I've got rid of all the air tubes. I have no catalytic converter. So whenever I ordered these without the air tubes. Just make sure that you decide which one you want. I'm going to put a link down below for this set, and then you can go with this set if you want to match what I've got going on, or you can possibly choose another one. Again, the options are there. Once you click the link, it'll take you to them. Now, in addition to both sides, obviously, you get this Y pipe. And again, this is all 409 stainless. And this one, the one thing that I have to say that I'm not real sure about is it's got two bungs for the O2 sensor. And on my Headmans, if you remember from the video, if you guys went and checked out that video, the bung was like right back here. And I think what I'm going to do is end up using this one because it's the closest to the Y. I would like for the oxygen sensor to see both sides, and I know there'll be some reversion here, not very much, but I think that this one's too far upstream. I'll have to talk about that a little bit more, think about it a little bit more, and if I come to a different conclusion, I'll let you know. But yeah, again, high quality stuff. Everything's made and welded really nice. And then you get, of course, your other side here. And this one's made a little bit differently. And again, just good quality. Now also in the box there's going to be some paraphernalia as far as instructions and stickers and all that good stuff. I will go through that at some point and see what's in there. And then you get your small parts box, and you can hear there's all kinds of nuts and bolts in here. But first, let's look at the other part of the exhaust system. And again, here's some paraphernalia, some stickers, some book stuff. We'll go ahead and stick that off to the side. And here's the exhaust. It all came in this one box. You can see the muffler here. This thing is not small, and it's kind of a monster. And again, if you want to match what I've got going on here, just click the links down in the description. It'll take you right to this system. But this is a pretty good sized muffler, and I would expect this to last a pretty decent amount of time. And I really have always enjoyed having Flowmaster products, even going back to whenever I had 5-liter Mustangs back in the 90s. That's whenever I started using them. Now you also get a heat shield for the muffler. I'm not going to take that out. You can kind of see that in there, of course, with these big hose clamps that will clamp onto the exhaust and keep that from heating up the bed, I guess. You also get all these clamps and hangers, which this is a pretty healthy amount of stuff. And then of course the pipes, which you're going to get some different configurations. That's what all these little pieces are for, because you may have a standard cab, you may have an extended cab, or you may have a crew cab. You may have a short bed, you may have a long bed. So in my case, I have an extended cab long bed. So I'm going to use some of these, I'm sure, in conjunction with what's already on there. And then you have your over the axle and then your tailpipe. Now it used to be that you got a real nice chrome looking tailpipe, and I always kind of like those, but I do like that this is a turn down, so I can tuck this up in the back of the truck as much as possible and have the exhaust just kind of point down. The other thing that I have that's a little bit different than most, which we'll go over to see if that's a problem, I did a video on it in the past, and that is I've converted my rear tank to a 38-gallon rear tank. So there's no spare tire back there. I keep it in the bed, and the gas tank does hang down further than a stock tank. However, it's no bigger in size, length, and width. But let me go ahead and break into this truck, start tearing it apart, getting these old Headman headers off, which old, like I said, they're only about a year and a half, and we'll see what we run into. So let me jump into it and we'll rejoin in a little bit here. All right, guys, so we're into the next day, and I expected it to take quite a bit of time, but in my case, I had an issue that may show up in your situation, and it should be expected. Don't think that you're out of the ordinary if it happens. Actually, think of you being out of the ordinary if it doesn't happen. Whenever I did my 302 small block, I had busted off a bolt in the head and had to drill and tap, and I actually hit a water passage. It didn't work out so well, so I had to go get a different head. But into this vehicle, whenever I took off the manifolds, that was 1.5 years ago, none of the bolts broke. Everything was great. Whenever I put on the Hedman headers, I at that point took each bolt and put a little bit of PB Blaster on it, ran the threads all the way in and all the way back out again before I installed the headers to make sure that I had them torqued pretty well and I didn't have to worry about anything binding up. Well, needless to say, that still didn't make a difference because I had one bolt that did snap off. It would not come loose, and it finally snapped off. Here's the engine. We're looking at it with the throttle body, right in front of you. And then here's the ports where the exhaust manifold bolts into. There's the first port, and there's the bolt hole. There's the port, obviously, in the valve. And then here's the next one, and the bolt hole. And then here's the spark plug hole, and see down in the cylinder there. And here's the next bolt hole for cylinder number 2, or the number 2 exhaust port. And there's the exhaust valve for number 2. And guess what? Boom! Yeah, it shouldn't be looking like that. It should be looking like that. That's because there's a bolt broken off in there. So I'm going to have to drill that out. And I hope that it goes well, because the last time I had to drill one out on a small block 302, I ended up hitting a water passage. Alright, so you can see the hole. I've had a couple different levels of drilling, and this is now the next size here. And I'm real close to the threads, so I think I can go up just one more drill bit size and possibly get this to free itself up. It doesn't look like that I've bottomed it out though, as close as I could, as far as, well, it's getting close. I think I see some breaks there at the bottom where the drill bit was hitting maybe the last bit of the bolt. So again, I'm going to go ahead and try to take out a little bit more material here and see how far we go. And again, these bolts were brand new just 1.5 years ago. So what I did in this case was take a 3/8 by 16th inch tap, and I chased every single thread that was on the head. Now, I had to drill out and re-chase the threads on the one that broke off, but I went ahead and chased all the rest of them now, so they're all nice and clean. The other thing that you have to be concerned with is, speaking with banks, they said that these can be run without gaskets. Now, I want to try without gaskets, but they said that if your head is pitted, or if it's, deteriorating, that there's a chance that even though their surface on their header is perfectly smooth, that it may not be as smooth on the head side, and that's where it'll leak. So what I did was I took a Scotch-Brite pad with my little grinder, and I went ahead and cleaned up all the ports and made them, really smooth, and got all the debris and rust and carbon and anything else that was there off. And what I'm going to do is apply a relatively thin coat, maybe not so thin coat, of ultra copper silicone, which is a high temp silicone. You can find it at any parts store. It's just called copper or ultra copper, and it comes in a tube, and you'll put it on just like you would silicone, and then at that point go ahead and bolt the header down, and that should take care of any imperfections that I might have still in the head. The other thing is I had to install the shield for the starter. I want to show you that now so you can take a look at what it looks like and what they're trying to get at here. First, in the instructions, you can see it's pretty self-explanatory. They want you to route this clamp a certain way in through the shield. And then once it's kind of into the shield here, you'll put it on the starter and it'll go around the starter. Just the starter, underneath the starter solenoid and around the starter. So you can see here, this is routed around the starter, the clamp is, and then the shield itself is basically up and down. It's not up against the starter. There's some standoffs that keep the shield away from the starter, and the same with the up here. It's not up against the starter solenoid. Also, make sure that you don't get your bolt in there. You don't want that bolt to be underneath the shield. It can be blocked a little bit, but not underneath. And you can see up here, or maybe you can't, where I've cleaned the ports and made them pretty much debris free and ready for silicone. And again, I had to chase all these threads, and I did it on both sides, so it's definitely ready to have the header lowered in here or raised in here. I believe this is, I think both of these go in from the bottom like my headbands did. And we'll go ahead and start tightening them down. But I wanted to give you a heads up so far of what was being done and things you need to be aware of. All right, so this side's installed, not a big deal. Everything went uneventful. There's plenty of room over here. And on those Headman headers, I had notched the frame a little bit down there. I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if I can get a good angle there. But there's a notch down near cylinders 3 and 4 where those tubes come down. And it's not even close to that. It definitely don't need it on here at all. And the silicone you can see there I put on just a thin layer, nothing real crazy. And as far as tightening all these go, you know, some of them can be tightened a little bit easier from underneath, and some of them from up top. The back two pretty much with a longer extension underneath, and then everything up here was up top. And just a wrench or a socket. I mean, it's your choice. I'd rather do a socket on the ones that I can, but a few of them you got to use a wrench. Now these bolts, because the flange is so thick, they're 1.25 inches in length. That's under the head length. So if you lose one or have a problem with one, definitely make sure that you get 1.25 inch ones. Now on the other side, it's going to be a whole nother story. Of course, read the instructions, follow the instructions for your vehicle. Some of them you're going to use longer bolts. They give you all kinds of different ones. In my case, I don't have to really worry about it because I've modified for those Headman headers. So the brackets, the oil dipstick tube, all that stuff is being held on differently than what it was originally. So it looks really good. I'm going to show you underneath because this was a concern that I had. Those Headman headers, whenever they exited, they were up here. They were much higher in the frame, and they were in the frame again up above. What a problem. The collectors came loose a few times and I could never tighten them. In this case, you can see the bolts are going to be easily accessible for the Y pipe to be tightened up, at least on this side, and I expect to be the same on the other. And also the other thing is the Headmans had a tendency to heat up this area here because it was all contained again within the frame. You know, they're nice headers, they do the job, and I still recommend them. If you don't have the money, go ahead and go with the Headmans. It's just there's going to be some inconveniences, like I said, but I'm real happy with the way these are, you know, down and exposed. So now I'm going to go to the other side and start working on that, and hopefully it goes just as smooth. All right, so the other side is on. You can see what it looks like here, and it looks like that this here, you have to only position it a certain way on this side. It can only be up and down. So I'll still have a little bit of difficult time accessing the top bolt a little bit, but not very much. But good fit. I have to connect my EGR pipe. You can see here there's a lot of bending that's going to happen. Sorry about the lighting. Let me close the hood so we can get a better light on that. All right, so you can see the EGR tube right here needs to be lined up with the tube that's on the header, and that's just me prying and bending the pipe to get it to line up and thread in. That's a new EGR pipe. I put that on whenever I was installing the headers. Unfortunately, I couldn't get around that. My old one was pretty bad. So if your stuff is old and rusty or just old, you may want to look at buying a new EGR pipe before you start on this. But it's pretty good fit. There'll be some massaging. All headers, I've never had a pair of headers or a set of headers that I've had didn't have to like bend them or pull them or stretch them a little or something, you know, as I'm bolting it up. And that's normal. Once they're tightened down and snugged down and you cycle it through some heat cycles a few times, that straightens them out. There's usually no problem at that point. All right, guys, so it's the next day. I took my time, and as always with these things, you got to be very patient. The one thing that I'll have to say that was more difficult than it should have been for me, and it's because of what I did prior, and that was the EGR tube. Now, as far as I know, the EGR tube should bolt up pretty normally. Again, in the instructions, it tells you what to do and what to look for, and in this case, it just says that the earlier models, like in 88 and 89, there's an adapter that's needed whenever you connect your EGR pipe back up to the exhaust. However, in my case, I had modified the EGR tube to work with the Hedman headers. So I had to do quite a bit of bending and massaging. In other words, hit it with a hammer to straighten it out and get it to where it was bent just right. Now, they do say in the instructions to leave the exhaust manifold loose, meaning the header, and then loosely connect all of the fittings for the EGR tube. You have the one up at the EGR valve, then you have the one at the port coming off one of the primaries of the exhaust. So basically, I guess in this case, what I would say to do is follow the instructions. Don't tighten all of your header bolts, and try to get your EGR tube to start on both the EGR valve itself up on top of the engine and then that port down on the primary tube. Once everything is loosely started, then go ahead and start tightening the exhaust manifold, and then finish off by tightening the EGR tube. That way it kind of stretches itself. If you guys think that you're going to get away with putting on these exhaust headers without removing your spark plugs, you could. I've done it in the past. There's a chance of that, but you might as well go ahead and pull them out, because there's a greater chance that you may crack one of the spark plugs and not know it. And then once you have it all together, realize that there's an issue. So again, a couple things that were different for me. The oil dipstick tube I modified for the old Hedman headers, and the EGR tube I modified for the old Hedman headers. Both of those things were a little bit more difficult putting back in. Other than that, everything seems to be going pretty well. So now, again, spark plugs, and then maybe I'll talk about firing it up, but not real sure yet, because I'd really like to put on the Y pipe first. I don't think I want to wake up my neighbors with straight headers. I know it would kind of sound cool and everybody would probably love to hear it, but we don't have that kind of rural neighborhood. Even though trucks are loud going up and down the street, they don't want their neighbors doing that. There's enough noise already. Okay, top side's back together, new plugs, and everything is the way it should be. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make a little noise, just a little though. Was that fun? I don't normally do that kind of stuff. It used to be a time I would run up and down the street with full headers, wide open,
didn't really care. But that's also when I lived way out in the country versus just kind of out in the country. So let's go ahead and start on this Y pipe part.
All right, guys, so it's running and it's smoking quite a bit because of all the oil that's in the pipe, and it's quieter than my old exhaust, which is good. Now I butchered up the middle because I was trying to utilize pipe that I already had. You can see that pipe there, I just welded it and I didn't do a very good job of it, but that's the way the muffler is supposed to be positioned per the instructions, and that is the way that it fits the best. Basically it puts the hanger at a slight angle to allow it to keep itself seated, and you just have to make sure that everything clears like the instruction says. Of course, this is the Flowmaster Force 2 system, and everything else bolted up really nice. It was pretty simple, to tell you the truth. So now what I'm going to do is leave this running for a little bit and go over it and check for leaks. Which it's amazing how quiet it is. So let's get you a little bit of a sound test. That's going to be a little bit further away because I don't want dust all over the camera. Sounds pretty good. And now my truck does not burn oil. I mean, it may, but it burns like a quart over an oil change, over 3,000 miles. All that stuff that's coming out that pipe is oil from the system. And it's real quiet up here. I mean, I can hear the injectors clicking more than I can hear anything else. That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like it has manifolds in here again, even though the manifold's leaked. So what can you expect? Well, you can expect to spend some time on it, so make sure you have your patience in check. I've said that on my other channel. It's the most important tool that everybody has, but hardly anybody uses. The patience that I needed for whenever the bolt broke off in the head and I had to drill and tap it, you have to take your time and do it. Same with mounting up the Y pipe. The headers, like headers I've had in the past, didn't quite line up with the Y pipe exactly, so you had to kind of bend them a little. You had to take a pry bar and pry one when the other was attached and connect it that way. And then as far as the exhaust, going back, anytime you're working with exhaust, you got to be patient. So I'm going to put the links down below for this system, the bank system without the air, and if you want to utilize your air pump in your catalytic converter, just click the link, and then once you're in there, look for the one that says, you know, that'll fit your vehicle. Also, I'm going to put the link down below for the Flowmaster system. It's much quieter than I thought it was going to be. I don't know how it's coming across on this stereo camera, but it's very, very quiet. I'm very happy with the sound. It's much quieter than my stock exhaust was with those Hedman headers. So I kind of expected that, because back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, I had 5-liter Mustangs, and anytime we put headers on and got rid of the catalytic converters, but we didn't change the mufflers, it was pretty loud. And then when we went to Flowmasters, as long as they weren't 2-chamber Flowmasters, it was much quieter than the stock exhaust. And what it is, the stock exhaust just can't handle all that flow that's happening. So again, I'm going to drive this for a few days and love it, to tell you the truth. I hope this helped you out, guys. If it did, click like or subscribe, and more importantly, to help me out on my Amazon affiliates accounts, click the link down below to take you to these headers and this exhaust system. I appreciate it. Thanks.